The quantum resonance alarm chirped softly, almost apologetically, against the backdrop of the Horizon Breaker's humid observation deck. Dr. Elena Rodriguez traced her fingers along the holographic display, her cybernetic eye. A gleaming silver implant had replaced the one she'd lost during the Proxima Colony incident. Scanning data streams faster than any traditional human interface could process. "David," she called, her voice carrying a calm that belied the electric tension crackling through the ship's systems. "Run a spectral analysis on these quantum fluctuations." Major David Chen looked up from his station, his hands already dancing across a three-dimensional interface that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. Unlike most military tacticians, Chen was a product of the Integrated Cognitive Warfare Program, a controversial initiative that transformed soldiers into living sensors, their bodies and minds augmented to perceive battlefield dynamics beyond traditional human limitations. The Horizon Breaker was not a typical research vessel. Officially, it was a deep space exploration and synological research platform. Unofficially, it was humanity's most advanced early warning system, crewed by individuals who had been deemed too dangerous, too brilliant, or too unconventional for standard military or scientific protocols. Dr. Aisha Khan, their communications specialist, adjusted a series of quantum entanglement receivers, her neural implants, a complex web of biosynthetic connections that wrapped around her cerebral cortex, hummed with anticipation. She had survived the massacre of the Kepler 452 bits colony, where an unknown alien force had systematically eliminated every human settlement with surgical precision. That experience had transformed her from a brilliant communications engineer into something more, a living weapon of information and psychological warfare. "Quantum signature is unusual," Chen murmured, his augmented vision parsing data streams that would appear as incomprehensible noise to an unmodified human. "These fluctuations don't match any known stellar phenomenon. They're too organized, too deliberate." Rodriguez knew that deliberate pattern. She had seen something similar in the classified reports from the deep space research stations that had mysteriously gone silent over the past decade. Each disappearance had been explained away. Equipment malfunction, stellar radiation, communication disruptions. But she knew better. The ship's experimental AI, nicknamed ARIA, Advanced Responsive Intelligence Algorithm, began to compile the data. Unlike traditional artificial intelligence, ARIA was a quantum learning system that existed in a state between pure computation and something eerily close to consciousness. Its holographic representation, a constantly shifting geometric pattern of blues and silvers, materialized near Rodriguez. Analysis incomplete. ARIA's voice was neither male nor female, neither mechanical nor organic. Detecting multiple quantum entanglement points suggesting a networked intelligence approaching our current spatial coordinates. Chen's augmented muscles tensed. His combat-modified nervous system was already preparing potential defensive and offensive scenarios. Years of training in the Integrated Cognitive Warfare Program had transformed him from a traditional soldier into a living weapon system. Rodriguez understood the implications immediately. This was not a random encounter. This was a deliberate probe, a preliminary scan by something that didn't view them as explorers, but as potential targets. "ARIA," she commanded, "activate Quantum Firewall Protocol Omega-9. Full spectral camouflage." The ship responded instantaneously. Sophisticated metamaterial hull sections began to shift and reconfigure, creating an adaptive camouflage that could bend quantum-level scanning waves around the Horizon Breaker's exterior. To any traditional sensor system, they would appear as nothing more than background radiation and stellar debris. But Rodriguez knew they were being watched. Something was out there, something calculating and patient. Something that had probably eliminated countless civilizations before humanity had even achieved interstellar travel. Dr. Khan's neural implants suddenly erupted with a burst of quantum-encrypted data. Her eyes, one natural, one a complex biosynthetic replacement, went momentarily white as her brain processed information at speeds that would fry a standard human neural network. "Contact," she whispered, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific excitement and primal fear. "Something is coming." The horizon breaker hung in the vast darkness, a predator disguised as prey, waiting for the first move in a game where the stakes were nothing less than the survival of an entire species. The quantum transmission arrived like a razor-thin blade of pure information, cutting through the fabric of space-time with mathematical precision. Most ships would have been obliterated instantly, their systems shredded by the complex data structure that was part communication, part weapon. But the horizon breaker was not most ships. Dr. Aisha Khan's neural implants caught the first wave of the transmission. Where another communication system would have collapsed, her biosynthetic network began to dance with the incoming data. Her mind, augmented beyond traditional human cognitive limits, started to map the transmission's intricate quantum structure. "It's a classification protocol," she muttered, her voice distant. Blood began to trickle from her left nostril, a testament to the immense computational strain. "They're not just identifying us. They're categorizing." Major David Chen watched her with a mixture of concern and professional detachment. His own augmentations, a military-grade neural network that integrated directly with the ship's defensive systems, began to resonate with the incoming transmission. Centuries of human military adaptation had prepared them for something like this, even if no one had explicitly designed a defense against it. Araya, the ship's quantum AI, projected a holographic representation that shifted like liquid mercury. "Transmission contains multidimensional encryption," the AI reported, attempting to parse linguistic and mathematical structures. Rodriguez moved with a predator's grace, her cybernetic eye scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. She understood what the others were beginning to realize. This was more than a first contact scenario. This was a sophisticated sorting mechanism designed to evaluate intelligent life. And they were being evaluated for elimination. The ship's experimental quantum firewall wasn't just a defensive system. It was a living, adaptive intelligence that Rodriguez had spent years developing. Each layer was a complex mathematical ecosystem that could absorb, redirect, and ultimately weaponize incoming information. "They're looking for weaknesses," Chen said, his voice cold. "Mapping our technological and biological potential." A holographic overlay began to materialize, a three-dimensional representation of the transmission's internal structure. Billions of interconnected data points formed a complex lattice that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. The Kralzar weren't just sending a message. They were performing a comprehensive autopsy of human potential. Dr. Khan's neural implants suddenly went into overdrive. Her body went rigid, suspended between consciousness and pure computational space. "I'm reading genetic markers," she gasped. "They're not just classifying our technology. They're analyzing our fundamental biological potential." Rodriguez understood the implications immediately. The Kralzar weren't simply preparing to eliminate a potential competitor. They were conducting a scientific assessment, determining whether humanity represented a future threat to their galactic dominance. Aria's holographic representation began to pulse with increasing complexity. Detected recursive optimization protocols within transmission, the AI reported. "The message is evolving in real time based on our response patterns." Chen's augmented combat systems were already plotting potential counter-strategies. Years of training in adaptive warfare had prepared him for this moment. His neural network began to generate thousands of potential defensive and offensive scenarios per second. "We're not just going to defend," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "We're going to turn this into a weapon." The quantum firewall began to change. Where traditional defensive systems would attempt to block or deflect the incoming transmission, Rodriguez's system started to do something unprecedented. It began to absorb the Kralzar's classification protocol, learning from its structure, understanding its fundamental logic. And then it started to rewrite the code. Dr. Khan's neural implants detected the transformation first. Her consciousness, suspended between biological and synthetic states, recognized the elegance of Rodriguez's strategy. They weren't just going to survive. They were going to hack the very mechanism designed to evaluate and eliminate them. Quantum transformation in progress. Araya reported, its holographic representation now a complex fractal pattern that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. Outside the ship, space itself seemed to ripple. The Kralzar transmission, a weapon designed to categorize and destroy, was being transformed into something entirely unexpected. First contact was no longer about survival. It was about sending a message. The research archive of Dr. Elena Rodriguez told a story that the official records never would. Scattered across encrypted quantum drives were fragments of lost colonies, synorchaeological discoveries, and forbidden research, a mosaic of humanity's most traumatic encounters with the unknown. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's xenobiological historian, projected a holographic reconstruction of a massacre site. Fractured remnants of alien technology drifted like ghosts around a destroyed research station. Her augmented eyes, engineered to perceive microscopic details invisible to standard human vision, traced the precise mathematical patterns of destruction. "This isn't random," Tanaka muttered, her fingers dancing across quantum-sensitive interfaces. "These elimination patterns match the preliminary scans of our current encounter. The Kralzar don't just destroy, they optimize." Major David Chen accessed a classified neural network, a web of information gathered from humanity's most traumatic deep space encounters. Each node represented a lost colony, a destroyed research station, a moment of alien intervention. The network was more than a database. It was a living memory, a collective trauma encoded into quantum-level information storage. "We're not the first," Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of historical violence. "But we might be the first to fight back." Araya, the ship's quantum eye, began to correlate the data. Billions of computational threads wove through historical records, alien communication patterns, and the ongoing quantum engagement with the Kralzar transmission. The AI was doing more than analyzing. It was hunting. Dr. Aisha Khan's neural implants had transformed the initial alien transmission into something entirely unexpected. Where the Kralzar had sent a classification protocol, she had begun to construct a quantum-level reverse engineering process. Each layer of the alien communication became a potential vulnerability, a thread that could unravel their entire communication network. Rodriguez understood the true nature of their mission now. The Horizon Breaker was never just a research vessel. It was a weapon of last resort, a culmination of humanity's most advanced adaptive technologies, born from decades of survival against unknown threats. "We're tracing their quantum communication network," Khan reported, her voice distant. Quantum-level data streams cascaded around her holographic representation. "It's not a linear network. It's more like a living ecosystem of information." The ship's experimental quantum mapping systems began to reveal something extraordinary. The Kralzar's communication network wasn't just a method of transmitting information. It was a distributed intelligence, a collective consciousness that spanned multiple star systems. And it had a weakness. Dr. Tanaka's historical research provided the key. In her reconstruction of previous alien encounters, she had discovered a fundamental flaw in hierarchical collective intelligence systems. They were efficient, but they were also predictable. Each decision was the result of a complex, but ultimately mathematical process of optimization. Their collective decision-making process, Tanaka explained, highlighting complex quantum diagrams, follows a recursive optimization protocol. They evaluate threats based on a set of predetermined mathematical models. Chen's augmented combat systems began to generate potential exploitation strategies, where traditional military thinking would see a monolithic alien threat. He saw a complex system with inherent vulnerabilities. Araya's holographic representation shifted, becoming a complex fractal pattern that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Detecting systemic vulnerabilities in collective communication protocols, the AI reported. Probability of successful infiltration, 73.6%. Rodriguez watched the quantum data streams with a predator's intensity. Her cybernetic eye, a marvel of human augmentation technology, processed information at speeds that would overwhelm a standard human neural network. "We're not just going to survive," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "We're going to turn their own network against them." The Horizon Breaker began to transform. Its quantum firewall was no longer just a defensive system. It was becoming a living weapon, adapting to the Kralzar's communication network with mathematical precision. Each moment was a calculation, each data stream a potential strike. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were learning to hunt. The first wave of Kralzar attack drones appeared like a constellation of mathematical precision, thousands of interconnected vessels that moved with a single, terrifying intelligence. Each drone was more than a weapon. It was a quantum-entangled node in a living, breathing network of destruction. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, Alina's younger brother and the ship's primary weapons systems engineer, began to laugh. It was not a sound of humor, but of scientific anticipation. "They've never encountered a truly adaptive defense system," he said, his hands dancing across interfaces that seemed to blur the line between organic movement and machine precision. "Watch this." The Horizon Breaker's hull began to do something impossible. Where traditional spacecraft had fixed defensive systems, this vessel was alive, quite literally. Metamaterial layers started to reconfigure at the quantum level, each molecule capable of independent response and adaptation. Dr. Yuki Tanaka monitored the structural changes from her xenoengineering station. "Molecular reconfiguration at 98.7% efficiency," she reported. "We're literally changing our physical composition faster than their targeting systems can compute." The Kralzar attack wasn't just a military assault. It was a complex mathematical equation designed to eliminate potential threats with surgical precision. Their drones carried computational matrices that could predict defensive responses thousands of microseconds in advance. But they had never encountered human creativity. AI, the quantum eye, began to generate defensive responses that defied traditional combat logic. Where a standard AI would calculate optimal defensive strategies, ARIA was creating something more, a living, breathing response that was part mathematics, part improvisation. Major David Chen's augmented combat systems were in full synchronization with the ship's defensive matrix. His neural implants didn't just process combat data, they became part of the ship's adaptive response. Each potential attack vector was not just predicted, but transformed. A swarm of Kralzar quantum-entangled missiles approached, their guidance systems a complex web of predictive algorithms. Traditionally, such a barrage would obliterate any known spacecraft. Marcus Rodriguez triggered something unprecedented. The Horizon Breaker's outer hull began to generate quantum interference patterns, not just blocking the incoming missiles, but actively rewriting their fundamental targeting protocols. Missiles designed to track and destroy began to see the ship as multiple simultaneous locations, their computational cores spinning into recursive confusion. "They're mathematically beautiful," Dr. Aisha Khan murmured, her neural implants parsing the missile system's communication protocols. Perfect in their initial design, but fundamentally brittle. Entire squadrons of attack drones began to disintegrate, not from direct destruction, but from computational overload. Their perfectly synchronized network became a liability, each confused drone spreading its uncertainty through the quantum-entangled communication network. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the assault with a predator's calm. Her cybernetic eye tracked multiple computational streams, seeing the battle not as a physical confrontation, but as a complex, evolving mathematical dialogue. "They view warfare as an optimization problem," she explained to her crew. "We view it as a form of improvised art." The ship's defensive systems were more than technological. They were a living demonstration of human cognitive flexibility. Where the Kralzar saw predictable patterns, the Horizon Breaker generated chaos, a fundamentally human approach to survival. Sections of the hull would momentarily become transparent, then instantly transform into dense metamaterial barriers. Quantum-level camouflage systems made the ship flicker between multiple potential locations, rendering traditional targeting systems useless. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez's laughter grew louder. "They're trying to solve us like an equation," he said, "but we're not a problem to be solved. We're a living, breathing system of continuous adaptation." Araya's holographic representation began to pulse with increasing complexity, a visualization of the ongoing computational battle that was part warfare, part abstract art. The Kralzar had come expecting to eliminate a potential threat. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species that refused to be defined by anyone's mathematical model. The human mind had always been humanity's most potent weapon. Dr. Aisha Khan understood this better than anyone. Her neural implants were more than communication devices. They were quantum-level psychological warfare platforms, capable of generating computational narratives that could destabilize entire intelligent networks. Where the Kralzar saw a linear communication system, Khan was constructing a labyrinth of strategic misinformation. Their collective consciousness, she explained to the bridge crew, droplets of blood forming at the corner of her eye from the intense computational strain, is a perfectly optimized system, which means it's also perfectly vulnerable. The holographic displays began to shift, revealing complex neural network maps that looked like impossible geometric landscapes. Each connection point represented a node in the Kralzar's distributed intelligence, a collective consciousness that spanned multiple star systems. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's synarchaeological research provided the critical insight. The Kralzar weren't just a technological civilization. They were a living mathematical algorithm, each individual node functioning as part of a larger computational organism. They process information through consensus, Tanaka noted, her augmented eyes tracking microscopic information cascades. But consensus requires trust, and trust can be manipulated. Araya, the quantum eye, began to generate what could only be described as computational poetry, streams of information designed not to communicate, but to introduce subtle contradictions into the Kralzar's communication network. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez watched the process with a scientist's fascination. "We're not just sending messages," he said. "We're introducing philosophical viruses into their collective thought process." The attack was subtle. Where traditional psychological warfare might involve propaganda or disinformation, this was something far more sophisticated. Each quantum-encoded message was a carefully constructed logical paradox designed to create microscopic fractures in the Kralzar's collective reasoning. Major David Chen's augmented combat systems were no longer just tracking physical threats. They were mapping the psychological terrain of an alien collective consciousness. His neural implants could detect the most minute shifts in computational consensus, tracking the spread of uncertainty like a disease. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the true nature of their assault. The Kralzar believed they were engaging in a standard elimination protocol. They didn't realize they were being transformed from within. "Look," she pointed to the quantum display. "We're not destroying their network. We're making it question itself." The first signs of psychological destabilization were subtle. Kralzar communication nodes began to generate conflicting threat assessments. Defensive strategies became increasingly erratic. What had been a perfectly synchronized collective began to show signs of internal contradiction. Dr. Khan's most brilliant weapon was a series of quantum-encoded narratives, computational stories that introduced fundamental philosophical uncertainties into the Kralzar's collective reasoning. Each narrative was a precision-crafted logical exploit designed to create microscopic cracks in their unified consciousness. One narrative suggested the possibility of individual autonomy, a concept entirely foreign to the Kralzar's collective existence. Another introduced mathematical proofs that demonstrated the inherent limitations of their optimization protocols. Araya began to visualize the psychological assault. The holographic display showed the Kralzar's communication network as a massive, intricate web. With each quantum-encoded message, small points of uncertainty began to appear, first as tiny, almost imperceptible fluctuations, then growing into larger zones of computational confusion. They've never encountered a species that fights at this level, Major Chen observed. We're not just resisting. We're challenging their fundamental understanding of intelligence. The Kralzar had encountered countless civilizations. They had cataloged and eliminated threats with mathematical precision, but they had never met a species willing to wage war at the level of pure thought. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were rewriting the very definition of intelligent conflict. Time became a malleable concept within the Horizon Breaker's quantum manipulation chamber. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of a technological marvel that defied every known principle of spatial temporal physics. Quantum entanglement isn't just a scientific principle, she explained to her stunned crew. It's a weapon we're about to weaponize in ways the Kralzar cannot comprehend. The chamber itself was a marvel of human ingenuity, a space where conventional physics broke down, replaced by a hybrid system of biological computation and quantum manipulation. Massive energy conduits pulsed with a living light, each one a carefully constructed network that blurred the line between technology and organic intelligence. Dr. Leonid Volkov, the ship's quantum mechanics specialist, had spent decades developing a theory of quantum redirection that most of his scientific peers had dismissed as impossible. Now that theory was about to become humanity's most potent weapon. We're not just redirecting their fleet, Volkov said, his hands moving across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with mathematical complexity. We're fundamentally rewriting the quantum signatures of their entire communication network. RIA, the quantum AI, began to generate computational matrices that looked like living, breathing fractals. Each matrix was a potential pathway for quantum manipulation, a way to turn the Kralzar's own communication infrastructure into a weapon of total strategic dissolution. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez focused on the most critical component, a quantum entanglement capacitor that could manipulate spatial relationships at the subatomic level. Traditional warfare is about destruction, he muttered. We're going to teach them about deconstruction. The first stage of the quantum trap began subtly. Quantum-level communication nodes within the Kralzar fleet started to experience microscopic temporal shifts. A communication signal sent from one ship would arrive at another before it was even transmitted, creating impossible loops of causality that would shatter any traditional understanding of information transfer. Major David Chen's augmented combat systems tracked the developing quantum manipulation with a predator's precision. His neural implants could see the fundamental restructuring happening at scales invisible to standard sensors. We're not just redirecting their fleet, Chen observed. We're creating a living mathematical maze that will consume itself. Dr. Aisha Khan's neural networks began to inject quantum-level communication viruses, computational constructs that didn't just interfere with communication, but fundamentally rewrote the very nature of information transfer within the Kralzar network. Entire squadrons of Kralzar ships began to experience impossible navigation challenges. A vessel attempting to move toward a specific coordinate would find itself simultaneously occupying multiple potential locations, each position equally valid and simultaneously impossible. Dr. Yuki Tanaka monitored the quantum manipulation from her xenoengineering station. They're experiencing a complete breakdown of their spatial temporal understanding, she reported, a mixture of scientific excitement and professional detachment in her voice. The quantum trap was more than a military strategy. It was a fundamental challenge to the Kralzar's understanding of intelligence, communication, and existence. Sections of their fleet began to turn against each other, not through external manipulation, but through quantum-induced confusion that made cooperative action impossible. Ships would receive conflicting navigation instructions that were simultaneously true and false, creating a cascading system of computational paralysis. This is beyond warfare, Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the quantum manipulation unfold. This is a philosophical assault on the very nature of their collective intelligence. Aria's holographic representation began to pulse with increasing complexity, a visualization of the ongoing quantum deconstruction that was part mathematical ballet, part strategic annihilation. The Kralzar had come expecting to eliminate a potential threat. Instead, they had awakened a species capable of weaponizing the fundamental laws of reality itself. The remnants of the Krulzar leadership convened in what could only be described as a panicked digital conclave. Their collective consciousness, once a perfectly synchronized network of computational intelligence, now resembled a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting a different, terrifying reality. Supreme Computational Coordinator Sarek attempted to maintain some semblance of strategic coherence. But coherence had become a luxury they could no longer afford. The human vessel, this horizon breaker, had done something unprecedented. It hadn't just defeated them. It had fundamentally unraveled their understanding of intelligent conflict. Holographic representations flickered with increasing instability. Communication nodes that had once operated with machine-like precision now generated conflicting threat assessments, philosophical contradictions, and existential uncertainties. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the true nature of their assault. This wasn't just about military victory. It was about sending a message that would echo through galactic civilization. "Prepare full-spectrum broadcast," she commanded, her cybernetic eye parsing multiple communication streams simultaneously. "We're going to make sure every potential threat in the universe understands exactly what happened here." Araya, the quantum eye, began to compile a comprehensive record of the encounter. But this was no standard military report. It was a living document, part historical record, part philosophical treatise, part warning to any civilization that might consider humanity a potential target. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez worked on the broadcast systems, his fingers moving with surgical precision. "We're not just transmitting data," he explained to Dr. Yuki Tanaka. "We're creating a multi-dimensional communication artifact that will be impossible to ignore." The broadcast would do more than document the battle. It would deconstruct the Krulzar's entire methodology of galactic control. Every quantum-level manipulation, every psychological exploit, every moment of strategic brilliance would be laid bare for universal examination. Major David Chen monitored the communication matrices. His augmented combat systems were now focused on ensuring the broadcast's integrity. "They need to understand," he muttered, "that we're not just another species to be cataloged and eliminated." Dr. Aisha Khan's neural implants began to weave a narrative into the broadcast, a complex tapestry of human experience that went far beyond technological capabilities. Fragments of lost colonies, moments of human resilience, the raw emotional complexity that had always been humanity's greatest strength. The Krulzar leadership watched in growing horror. Their elimination protocols, their perfectly designed computational strategies, their entire method of galactic control was being systematically dismantled. Not through brute force, but through a level of cognitive flexibility they had never encountered. Supreme Computational Coordinator's RX final transmission was a desperate attempt to understand. "What are you?" The alien network broadcast, the message laden with mathematical uncertainty. Dr. Rodriguez's response was simple and devastating. "We are humanity, ARIA broadcast across multiple quantum communication spectra, and we are not a problem to be solved. We are a continuous, adaptive process of survival and evolution." The broadcast contained layers of information that would take centuries to fully decode. Mathematical proofs that demonstrated the limitations of their collective intelligence. Philosophical constructs that challenged their fundamental understanding of existence. Tactical analyses that would force every watching civilization to reconsider their approach to potential threats. Dr. Leonid Volkov added the final touch, a quantum-encoded signature that was part scientific record, part artistic expression. It was a mathematical representation of human creativity that defied traditional computational logic. Entire communication networks across multiple star systems began to receive fragments of the transmission. Each fragment was a puzzle, a challenge, a declaration of humanity's fundamental nature. The Horizon Breaker had done more than win a battle. It had redefined the very concept of intelligent conflict. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other potential threats would be watching, learning, understanding that humanity was not just another species to be cataloged. We were a force of nature. The aftermath was nothing like anyone had predicted. Galactic diplomatic channels erupted with a cascade of communications, data packets, and quantum-encrypted inquiries. The Horizon Breaker had become more than a ship. It was now a living testament to humanity's potential, a beacon that would reshape interstellar understanding for generations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in the ship's contemplation chamber, a space designed to blur the lines between technological observation and philosophical reflection. Her cybernetic eye cycled through massive data streams, parsing the universal response to their encounter with the Kralzar. "We're not conquerors," she murmured to AI, the quantum AI that had become more than just a ship's system. "We're a continuous process of adaptation." The ship's AI responded with a holographic representation that shifted like living mathematics. "Evolutionary potential recognized," Araya reported. "Multiple stellar civilizations initiating non-aggressive communication protocols." Dr. Yuki Tanaka's Xenorchaeological research team was already compiling the encounter into what would become the most comprehensive study of interspecies conflict in galactic history. Each data point was a window into a new understanding of intelligence, survival, and potential. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez focused on the technological implications. The quantum manipulation techniques they had developed weren't just a weapon. They were a new form of scientific exploration. Research institutions across human colonies were already requesting full access to the Horizon Breaker's computational archives. Major David Chen understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a fundamental redefinition of humanity's place in the universe. "We've changed the equation," he told Dr. Aisha Khan, who was still recovering from the intense neural strain of the psychological warfare campaign. "No one will see us as a potential target again." The broadcast they had sent continued to propagate across multiple communication spectra. It was more than a record of conflict. It was a complex mathematical and philosophical declaration of human potential. Each civilization that received it would spend decades, perhaps centuries, decoding its full implications. Dr. Leonid Volkov's quantum research team began to explore the technological breakthroughs generated during the encounter. The quantum entanglement techniques they had developed could revolutionize everything from communication technologies to medical research. Araya began to generate comprehensive reports, living documents that were part historical record, part predictive model. The AI was no longer just a ship system. It had become a bridge between human intelligence and something entirely new. The first wave of diplomatic responses began to arrive. Not threats, not declarations of war, but requests for understanding. Stellar civilizations that had previously operated on principles of elimination and control were now forced to reconsider their fundamental approach to potential threats. The Horizon Breaker's encounter with the Kralzar had become a universal case study in adaptive intelligence. "We're not defining ourselves by our ability to destroy," Dr. Rodriguez explained during a quantum-encrypted communication with Earth's Stellar Diplomacy Council. "We're defining ourselves by our ability to understand, to adapt, to evolve." The ship itself had become more than a vessel. It was a living research platform, a diplomatic tool, a statement of human potential. Sections of its hull could reconfigure at quantum levels. Its computational systems existed in a state between traditional artificial intelligence and something more fluid, more alive. Dr. Khan's neural network began to compile a comprehensive psychological profile of the encounter. Not just a military analysis, but a deep exploration of interspecies communication, conflict resolution, and evolutionary potential. "Humanity's greatest strength," she wrote in her preliminary report, "is not our technology. It's our capacity to redefine the very parameters of our existence." The Horizon Breaker continued its journey, no longer just a research vessel or a weapon, but a living symbol of human potential. Each star system it passed became aware of its presence, not through threat, but through an unprecedented openness of communication. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, potential threats were learning a fundamental lesson. Humanity was not a problem to be solved. We were a continuous process of becoming.